in here with time. Okay.
Okay.
All right. See, call the meeting to order. Start with roll call.
Commissioner Allen,
Present.
Commissioner Norwood will not be in attendance this evening. Commissioner Cdsa,
Here.
Commissioner Roberts will not be in attendance for study session. Commissioner Stallings,
Here.
Commissioner Orr,
Here.
and Mayor Pinkinen.
Here. All right, thank you. Item number 2, at Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda.
If I may,
Yep.
9.1, it's the trash compactor.
David, do you want to talk about the trash compactor? Are you prepared to? Please come on up. Come on down.
So we got a better deal in the end, didn't we? We've saving $40-some thousand or so. I can't get it to load right now, but
Yeah, I think it really wasn't the financial component. It was the fact that the company that was awarded it originally was not able to deliver the compactor that we originally got. So we essentially were pulling back and trying to get one, and it just turned out that when we reapproached other vendors, the price was actually going to be lower. We're actually going to get some money back at the end of the lease. So it is a better deal, but the truth of the matter is we need a compactor out there on the field, on the hill, and we need it as soon as possible. So because of some of the logistics right now with inventory and supply and what's going on in the world, and the fact that they could not deliver in the time that they had said originally, we decided to pull back on that. And it just turned out that we ended up saving a little bit of money at the same time.
And this one's also compatible with what we initially were going for.
Yeah, it's
Same size,
a
same
very
setup,
similar
everything like that.
compactor, Yellow House versus the other contractor company. Very similar items, and if you look at the price and the specs on them, almost identical. So I mean, really, when we look at them, it's just a Ford versus a Chevy, and so it's almost semantics in many ways.
and you expect delivery, what, next month or something?
I believe it's 6 weeks, as a matter of 4 to 6 weeks, yes, sir.
Right. And then you're having a new cell planned, is that correct? It shows that we're paying $47,000 to Burns and McDonald for land waste solid master planning. Is that in a new cell, or is that just?
We're actually going to be looking at pulling that, but that's a master plan, not just for the landfill. That actually covers the entire solid waste program.
Oh.
And this actually relates to a question that Commissioner Orr had a while back on an item we were purchasing, and I didn't have the answer. And when I went back home, I realized we didn't have a kind of a logical idea of where we are, where we're going to be in the future. So this plan that we're looking at with Burns and McDonald answers questions about, where our service is going to be, questions of where we're going to be as far as replacing equipment in the long term, a capital replacement strategy. It does roll in the landfill planning that we're already doing, but also takes into consideration things like the Spark program that we're doing, looking at methane gas for a little bit of revenue for the city, questions of recycling, kind of sustainability questions as well. So it's more of something, where do we want the landfill to be 10, 15, 20 years when I'm gone and we have someone at the helm, someone else at the helm, or all of us are gone, in some ways.
Well, thank you.
No, Jerry will still be here.
Before you sit down, that Burns and Mac contract was pulled once, right?
Yes, and unfortunately, we still have some issues with it that have escaped our quality control, so we're going to ask to pull it again.
Okay.
And give it some extra scrutiny before we bring it back.
But it's contractually stuff, it's not the
Yes.
concept.
No, it's not the concept. The
Okay.
concept is solid. We're going to be bringing it to you. Just, we're not. we
Yeah,
still have some issues with
I
it.
was, and I will be honest, it was the holidays and I was off, and there was a paragraph in there that I had missed, and I felt that it could create a little bit of a conflict because of the service that we were asking for, which was more of a planning paper exercise where we're going to give them data, they're going to come and talk to us about what we want to do, and then they're going to give us a plan versus an engineering situation where we're going to be doing design and boots on the ground. and there were some insurance components, a few other things that I don't think were appropriate for the contract.
On another issue you touched on, I'd like to get an update from you guys at a study session on the Spark, the program for the methane capture, where we are with that.
Okay, matter of fact, we've been
Very timely, so
Yes.
yes, we could probably do that very soon, right?
We've actually met with them a few times. There was a few things that we've been looking at, a few pathways that they want to go as far as their engineering design, and we've just been helping them with some data, so we can actually probably put that on the agenda for next meeting. That'll work, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to paragraph 3, study items 3.1, discuss emergency home repair potential and rental rehabilitation program.
Yeah, and let me kick this off. We have been talking about building permit fees for the last, well, for several meetings, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. But one of the things that's come out of that discussion is a desire from the commission to maybe have a program that helps people, not just with permit fees, but probably with improvements to their property. And so I thought we would start out today, and I appreciate Sherry Azell and Mike Biggers coming from Cdsa on relatively short notice. I mean, to talk about what we do now, and Cdsa does a whole bunch of stuff, but what they specifically do that the city funds, and we funded a few things. And then we also thought we would have a discussion about, to try to flesh out, what do we want a program to do? Because we have the ability, either with CDBG funds or other city funds, to probably put together any kind of program that you really want us to have. So I think it's probably good to start with what are we doing now, particularly since we do fund emergency home repairs. And so, Sherry, do you want to come on up? Sherry's been, my goodness, Sherry, I don't even know how long you've been the director of Cdsa.
That just makes me feel so freaking old.
You've been doing such a good job.
I've been at CDSA since 1997, and I've been director there since 2001. So I was a much younger woman, but I'm way smarter now.
Yes, wisdom comes with years, I guess.
So I wanted to, talking to you about what we do with the emergency repair funds you give us through CDBG, I thought the best thing to do is to give you the most detail I have. And so I brought to you a printout of exactly what we spent the emergency repair funds for during this last program year. I think we have about $800 left in there, and then I'll show at the bottom as a
Thank you.
balance. So you can see the kinds of projects that we're doing. Did I give you them? Yeah, you want one, Scott? Sure, thank you. So, pretty self-explanatory. Not going to read to you. I will say that the ones that, I'll explain some of the red notes. The bid too high, our program is designed so that the maximum outlay per person is $5,000. So that if it's over $5,000, we can't do it in this emergency repair program. The one where it says WAP on the HVAC system, that's another program we operate, so that is not funded by the city of Enid. So we were able to do that out of there and save the funds, the CDBG funds. On the second page where you see H&S denied, that project was denied because, well, I'm going to tell you really how the program operates. Mike Biggers is our housing coordinator, and I asked him to come because he knows more of the day-to-day operation of programs. And when I asked him, why was that project denied, he said, that's a health and safety denial. And that means that they went out in this particular project, they went out to inspect the house, and it was so unsanitary that we wouldn't want our people working in it. And so when that happens, and it happens occasionally, then we tell people that clean it up, we'll come back. So that's why that one is still on the list. So you can see that we've pretty much expended it for projects that are under $5,000. I think it's pretty great that we were able to do a lot of roofs in this project. These are obviously small houses, but when a roof goes bad, then the entire structure is at risk, and that has an impact on the entire neighborhood. So those are good projects to do. I wanted you to note that on the right of the funds expended, where it says % of AMI in those three columns, That is the income level of the people assisted. So 30% of area median income for a one-person family. You can see across, we give the number of in the household. So their income would be less than $14,350 a year. So these are very poor people generally. And if you also notice the family size, you'll notice that the majority, there are a lot of different family sizes, but a lot of them, the one-family ones, those are generally elderly people who are living alone. So that's what we're doing with that.
Sherry, do you have any sense of the demographics of where? Is it mostly east? Is it?
You can see the zip code there on the left in the third column. So those are 73701 zip codes primarily. Of course, we have the address of every person and the name that we've served. We just feel that it was appropriate to put it out there today. So
Right.
it's primarily on the east side.
Yep.
We spend every penny you give us in emergency repair.
Right.
Obviously, we could spend a lot more. Not everyone is approved for emergency repair, but if they aren't, there's a reason. We're not in the business of not helping people. You know, it's our mission of our agency to help people, but our rules are given to us by the funder, and sometimes we're very tightly regulated on what we can do. So if people don't fit the income guidelines, for instance, or if they want something that's beyond the scope, because this is an emergency repair program, and if they want their carpet replaced or, you know, something like that, that we don't consider that, you know, a health and safety issue, we can't do that within the scope of this program. A lot of people want windows, not an emergency. And if we started doing things like that were out of the scope that we would love to do to help people, then we're going to have some old person come in the middle of winter with no heat. And then we're not going to be able to address that. So, you know, truly, we really do want to help people.
Right.
Okay. Now, the other thing you've given us money for, huge amounts of money for this year, is COVID funds to help people who were in danger of being evicted or of going into foreclosure and who had a COVID-related reason for that. Nearly $500,000 in that. And I want to show you, I didn't make copies of this, but I'm going to leave this with you so you can have time to look at it. These are the lists of all the people that were assisted with those funds. So pages and pages and pages. So, for instance, this is the first lot that you gave us. I think it was April of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see it was all, there's some over here that were in mortgage, but almost all of these were rent payments. And they range from $500 to $1,000, $1,200, $1,400, $1,600. We were paying what was needed to keep people, remember, April 2020. A lot of people were being impacted by COVID at that time, either because their job shut down, because somebody got sick, because they were taking care of someone else. They had to actually document their COVID-related reason, not for us, but because the funding source required that. So anyway, I'll leave these with you so you can see that too. I will tell you that Cdsa housing program is over $1 million a year. So this is a small part of our housing services. This $500,000 was not in housing, it was in our emergency assistance program, which this year is larger than it has ever been in our entire history of operation. Our budget is usually around $3 million a year. We're going to hit $4 million, probably more this year. And most of that is because of federal funds. So that have been just kind of thrown at us, frankly, you know, address this emergency. We have tripled the size of our emergency assistance staff at Cdsa. We have done things to make our applications online so we can get more applications in with early on less direct exposure to COVID. But we are a month behind in emergency assistance applications at Cdsa, working 3 times as hard as we ever had with 3 times as much staff. So times are hard for people in Enid. I'm really glad that we've been able to do, with your help, $500,000 in rent assistance. But we're also running the Community Cares Partners Program, which is helping people pay rent directly through a program in Oklahoma City, Emergency Solutions Grants funds, lots of different funding right now, and we're getting it out the door as fast as we possibly can. So this is kind of one of those times when times are tough, agencies like CDSA, that's when we really have to step up. You know, that's when we really feel the pressure of not just the need, but the resources, and have to quickly respond to be able to get those resources out in the community. So I'll give you this list.
Sherry, do you, because of the city's designation as a metropolitan area, is that going to increase some of the money that you're going to see come into CDSA? And when would that likely start to show up?
So I was here when CDSA lost their metropolitan community status because we dropped below 50,000 population. And what happened then was our city was an entitlement for some funds that that meant that we didn't have to compete for those funds, home funds, for instance. At that time, the city of Enid was receiving about $200,000 in home funds, and those went to CDSA. We didn't have to compete for them, nothing. We did it. We were doing owner-occupied rehab with those funds at the time. Okay, then the city lost its entitlement, and so we had to compete. Well, now CDSA is getting $500,000-$600,000 in those same funds by competing, because we're not limited in just the little, you know, we can go for the whole pool, not just for what the city of Enid was entitled at that time. I have heard, and we've been saying for years, once you get over that 50,000 population, it's going to open up funding sources for us. I have not seen that yet. So, but we are keeping an eye on that, and believe me, we compete for whatever we are eligible for to bring those funds to the community.
So where we are, and you may be advised of this already, you know, we're looking at our fee structure, and you know, one of the things that came up was people have to replace their hot water tanks and that.
Yeah.
We were looking at raising our prices for the first time in 15 years from $25 to $35. It felt like there really isn't a will to do that with this group. There is definitely a will to help people with that fee. But we don't know how to do that. Do we designate a certain area of town that you can get, you know, and that doesn't seem right. Clearly, if you need a new hot water tank, the $25 inspection fee is the least of your worries.
And hot water tanks, you all know, have gotten a lot more expensive.
Exactly.
In the installation, the requirements for venting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I'll tell you what I think about determining eligibility for programs. It's really time intensive but it's part of what you do. It's just part of doing business when you're receiving government funds, whether it be local, state, or federal funds. So for us, you know, we have, and I think that's the only way you can do it. You have to do it by income. You have to make people income eligible. So unless, I suppose, hadn't thought of this before, but just off the top of my head, I suppose you could designate an area of a community as a revitalization zone and say anybody that lives in the revitalization zone, you could even make it for property owners, just thinking off the top of my head. But anyone in that revitalization zone is eligible for a discount on whatever. You know, you could do something like that. That would be easy, wouldn't it? Document where you live, show me your whatever. That would be real easy documentation. Income documentation isn't that easy. You know, right. You have to decide what you're going to take. Tax returns, okay, some people don't file them. Check stubs, how many? You just have to determine how you're going to do it, and then do everybody the same way. You know, to be fair. But I think if I was going to do that, I would designate a zone and then maybe move it. I really think the problem of housing revitalization, of neighborhood revitalization, is one of our most intractable problems. It's very difficult to address, and I've thought about it for years. It's been a concern of mine. How can we improve our neighborhoods, make higher quality affordable housing? And at CDSA, we've taken the perspective of it being a long game. You know, it's not what you do, it's not the incremental things you do, it's what you do for a long time. You know, so, and I say that, I think I can demonstrate that in that we decided 20 years ago, and because I've been there so long, I know that, that we were going to do some things to increase the inventory of affordable housing in our community, because there just wasn't enough. So over that 20 years, Cdsa has partnered with private developers and done things on our own, and we've created over 250 units of affordable housing. Pheasant Run, Roosevelt Park, Forest Ridge, East Side redevelopment, our own 50 units, and others that we've done. But we've done it over the long term. Also, having watched this for decades, I think I've seen a lot of improvement on the east side. Not in every neighborhood, but I have seen improvement on the east side. Some of that started with targeted demolition to remove blight. I think that's really important. And I think roofs are huge. When you got a big hailstorm, everybody that's got insurance gets a roof, but the poor guy that doesn't have insurance, you know, his roof starts falling in, and so we've tried to focus on that. I'm not saying there aren't things you can do, I just think it calls for a long-term plan and consistency.
Okay.
And designate an area. Concentrate on something.
Okay.
Sherry, how do you feel about the designated areas that we have for our CDBG funding as being those areas, since CDBG funding is for the poverty areas that we have in town?
That's true, but some of the programs just serve people from those areas, so they're not, I mean, all your CDBG funding, some of it might go to human service programs that aren't necessarily addressing, you know.
I understand that, but the mapping, we already have the mapping out for our CDBG, and we already declared that.
Well,
How do you
I'm sure I
feel?
know what they are, so I'm sure, you know, you pick the right ones. Of course, there are qualified census tracts,
Yeah.
federally qualified, that theoretically attract additional funding.
Part of the purpose of this study session is to get more input from you, commissioners, on what kind of program you want to see, because as we talk about building permit fees, and we talk about a hot water heater that might cost, I don't know, $600, $500, I don't know what.
$1,000, what's a hot water
$1,000.
heater, Mike?
And I don't know if that includes installation or not.
$1,400 to $1,500 with installation.
Then, you know, that in itself is an obstacle. But I think we're also talking about, and you said some of it in your emergency home repair. Non-emergency home repair might be a 20-year-old roof that may not be leaking yet but needs to be replaced, cost 10 grand. I think that's part of what maybe commissioners are talking about is if we want a program like that, the building permit fee, from our perspective, is probably the very tiny part. So I think we would be talking about not just helping with fees, but helping with actual projects. And I think it goes back to, you talked about we'd have to have some kind of way of whether it's qualified census tracts and income or income to do that. And from, at least from my perspective, we can set up a program any way we want to, but I think we would first, in my opinion, would want to look to agencies like yours or other agencies that could or do similar programs and could do a program because you already have expertise. You already have the Mike Biggers and other folks that can do those things. So,
Well, and you know, it's not only, I mean, expertise is important, but it's not only that. I think one of the things that Cdsa is able to do, has been able to do well, is we have other sources of funding. So,
Right.
you know, when we're running your emergency repair program, you're not paying for Mike Biggers. You know, you're paying for 10% of Mike Biggers because we're running this other stuff too. So, you know, we actually charge the hours. He keeps track of his hours and charges just those to CDBG. So, you know, that makes it a lot more cost effective. Somebody else is going to have to hire someone. You know, they can't hire a tenth of Mike Biggers. So that makes sense.
well, the CDBG census tract stuff makes some sense to me because I can't visualize the maps right now, but I know that those are intended to serve what CDBG funds serve, as low to moderate income people. and/or activities. And so I think that's what we're talking about, right?
Yes, and in those targeted areas.
And then I've heard, Derwin has talked to me about, I'm sorry he's not here tonight, he's talked to me about his interest in rental rehab programs. And of course, we had one of those or the city of Enid had one of those many years ago. Cdsa has never operated that program. And there's really two ways to think of that, I think. And one is that landlords are business people. This is their business. There's another way to think of it, and that is that if your mission is, as ours is, developing high-quality, affordable housing, then you should support that. Because the beneficiary of that is the low-income person who's renting from the landlord. So if you do that, then you require the landlord to do certain things. Maintain certain habitability standards, take care of his lead-based paint issues, keep the rent at certain levels, So if you're going to access that kind of funding, there's some things you need to do to support the community. So I could go either way on that.
Okay. All right. You guys have any other questions?
Well, while we have you in here, I just want to say thank you very much for the efficiency that you have with CDSA in getting these funds and getting them out really fast. You're, excuse me, one of the few organizations that's capable of doing that, maybe the only organization that's capable of doing that. So thank you for your organizational skills and what you do to keep CDSA running.
Well, people don't realize we have like 35 employees minimum, at our regular operating level. And so it's not me. There's a lot of people working there.
No, but every organization needs a good leader, and they've got a fine leader at CDSA.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
No, you guys do so much for the community that is often overlooked by much of the population, but it's not overlooked by us. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Always glad to partner with you. Oop, that's not mine. Okay. Mike, anything you want to say?
I would just say one thing, that the funds that you give us each year, there's a new buzzword out there around the world called blending. And I blend a lot of those funds with my weatherization dollars and other dollars. So if I can fix that roof for $5,000, I can put another $8,000 in windows, air conditioning, heating into it, fix that home up. And the next thing I know, the neighbor next door is cleaning their yard. Okay?
Yeah.
And
It
our
makes a difference.
weatherization program in the last year, how much have we grown?
We went from 2 counties to 6, from $50,000 to $250,000.
And we're continuing to grow. So.
Sherry, I've got, just to not lose the opportunity when you're here, you mentioned you had the emergency home repair program, and
Yes.
I think CDBG for a number of years has funded that. The funding level is relatively, it's been anywhere from, I'm going to say, around 50,000 to 100,000 or something like that. And you have limitations on it, like you mentioned already. Do you have a home improvement program for people that qualify, or is
No.
that something that might be a little, I don't know if that's the same thing as rental rehab, or I think maybe that's part of what the commission is thinking
Well,
about.
I don't think that'd have to be rental rehab. I mean, those are two different programs. If you have, I think it's kind of attractive, the idea if you have a low-income homeowner who wants to do some home improvement and could maybe get some skin in the game, I think that's really important. Not to be 100%, but maybe, if you can put 50%, we can match you, or if you can do 20%, whatever you decide. But I think it works better when people have some of their own skin in the game. But if you can help them, I don't think that would be a bad thing. It's just so much money. It's so much. So.
Well, actually, where I was going with it was more of those do-it-yourselfers to save money on the en route, not to get the permit and do it themselves, and what safety issue does that pose? Poses a safety issue to the police department, it poses a safety issue to the fire department, because if something's done the wrong way and it doesn't get inspected because they don't want to pay the inspection fee because they really ain't got the money and that's why they're doing it themselves, fire department goes in on a gas leak. All of a sudden there's a spark, boom, the whole house blows up. If it was inspected because they went and they got the inspection because they didn't have to pay for it, in that low-income situation, we wouldn't have an explosion on the fire department. That's what I'm looking at, is compliance without enforcement or punishment. It's to make our community safer, and especially in the low-income areas.
So they
Safety.
still have to get the permit, they just have to pay.
But they have to get the inspection with the permit, but it not costing them that extra so they don't, shortcut it.
Well, and
That's what I'm
honestly,
looking for, is
people
the
do that.
Yes,
There are a lot of people out doing their own repairs and
Yes.
doing it as cheaply as they possibly can, and
yeah,
they have
and
to.
if it's done cheaply and it's done because they can do it, and it's not done up to code, then we got a bigger issue. You're not only talking about just that job, you're talking about the neighbor to that job, you're talking about the police department, the fire department. This can go bigger and bigger. And it's just because of that, don't want to pay that. And it's getting compliance without punishment of the pain on the low income side. That's the way I was looking at it.
Okay. Good.
Gerald, sometimes when we're doing the budget, we get glazed over when we're going through all these numbers and pages. But what's the magnitude of the money that we do put into these types of programs? And I'm not talking about money that the feds give us to give. I'm talking about how much comes out of our coffer that goes to programs like Sherry's talking about?
Off the top of my head, next to nothing. Can you think of anything, Aaron, that is not from CDBG?
So this is not something
CARES?
we're currently doing?
Correct.
Okay. That's why I was a little confused, and I think that I'm right that the money that, the CDBG money is somebody else gave it to us, and we give it to somebody.
Yes.
So,
But you set the budget, so if this
I
becomes a
understand.
priority, we can certainly
And
do
clearly,
that.
we do have a movement afoot to do that,
Or we could fund agencies that do it. And we
which
have-
sounds to me like the best way to go. We're probably not set up to run one of those programs, and Sherry's been doing it all
I'm
her.
not saying, oh, yeah, we'll do it either.
We're not trying to put you on the spot, but we know how well you do what you do.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't you want to stay for the meeting?
All right. Item 3.2, discuss water storm preparedness and routes.
Good evening. I'm Ashley Humphrey, Supervisor for Stormwater Roadway Maintenance. So on top of everything that we do with roadway maintenance, asphalt and potholes, we are also in charge of the winter storm preparation for the city of Enid. We just wanted to kind of go over, since we have some new commissioners, what we intend, like what we do for our winter storms. What I do. There we go, okay. So public safety is the priority for the city of Enid. To ensure public safety is met, cleanup efforts around the police station, fire stations, and hospitals is and will always be priority. So if our emergency response personnel cannot get out to assist the public, then that is a problem. So we will, maximum effort will be made to ensure that all these areas are cleaned before anything else. So right here, everybody knows that, I don't think Oklahoma ever knows what the weather's going to entail. So this is what we think of when we get that weather report. We really have no idea what's going to happen, so we try to always be prepared. We have our winter storms broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 is our base phase. So this is going to be a 1 to 3 inches of snow accumulation along with a light glaze of ice. Phase 2 is going to be about 3 to 6 inches of snow. It's also going to be light to moderate amount of ice. And then phase 3 is pretty much what we experienced last year. That's going to be our 6+ inches of snow, high winds, our moderate to severe accumulations of ice. And then at phase 3, I do like to note that other support from other departments would be required. So for the most part, my department, my 20 personnel that I have, we do try to do our job within ourselves, but sometimes we do have to go elsewhere. And that's when people like Public Utilities comes into play with their heavy equipment operators to help us remove snow, along with Parks Department and Tech Services. So these are just some examples of our routes that we do. We stay to our main roadways. We do not, unfortunately, at this time, go into any residential areas. This would be West Route 2. Sorry, it's kind of small, you can't see it very well. Here's East Route 1. East Route 2.
Just to help them on the routes, what we're talking about is arterials and collector streets, right?
Correct.
Not local streets.
Correct.
Okay. The event that we just had, that was a phase 1 type event?
Almost a phase 1. I'd say phase 0 if we had that, but yeah, phase 1 you could put it at.
Okay. It's very timely, not only to update commissioners new and those that have been here a while, but also we just had an event where, you know, I know people are commenting about why doesn't the city do this, why don't they do that? There's always good comments too about people saying, well, the city does do this, and the city, you know. So that's part of why we're having this presentation. So I appreciate what you and the crews did over the weekend, and so yeah, so you're focusing on the different areas of the city.
You know, it's really hard sometimes for us with weather reports because honestly, we never know what we're going to get. They're going to say we're going to get a monsoon and we get a sprinkle. We try to play by ear, but we also, my guys are really good with, if I need to call them on a dime, they come in off their vacations, well, not vacations, but if they're, you know, their time off, and they don't have a problem to assist me in whatever we need to do. So, you know, we do the best we can do.
These routes look really detailed, Ashley. It looks like you're indicating where hills are, where bridges are, so that you can give special attention to parts of the street that are more slippery than others. So very
Correct.
detailed, so that if a different operator that's never been on there needs to do that route, he can look at what the important features are and get it done. So it looks very detailed.
So each one of our plow trucks and every one of our vehicles that goes out during a snow event, each operator will have one of these books so that they can refer to it at all times. Nobody's ever going to remember everything, so we like to make sure that they're all aware of the areas. We do like to focus mostly on especially the hilly areas and bridges, because those areas tend to ice over faster than your flat ground. So this is an example of what we have in our book, kind of the standard procedures of how to salt and sand areas. Once they are finished with a route, they do go ahead and restart that route over and over again. So we'll have one person, we usually have, we have some salt dogs, which are in our smaller, I don't know if you've seen them driving around. They're in our smaller pickup trucks. And then we also have our big salt sand spreaders and plows that we run as well. And our salt dogs, they are our smaller trucks. They try to go more into the congested areas because it's easier for them to get in and out than it is to bring a big old plow, especially like downtown with parking and things like that. So this right here will just say, you know, salt all sands and bridges, schools, hills, try to cover all school areas, especially if we know school's not closed that day between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. Collector streets, so these are the streets that we would have in case of a major snow event, we would have our snow piled up on, that we would go ahead and solid waste would assist us in removing the snow from those areas. This was kind of just an outline I found on our website that shows kind of the broad spectrum of all of our snow routes. And just so you know, I mean, we have 20 people, 22 personnel, including myself and my foreman, that handle all of this. So it's a pretty big job, but they do a great job at managing it. So the City of Enid Street Department would like to remind all citizens that during inclement weather, avoid travel at all costs. This not only helps to ensure that you as citizens are safe, but that my crew is safe as well out there. It also makes sure that we have fast and more effective cleanup efforts. I also wanted to include a couple of safety tips into this slide that I haven't included in the last briefings. Don't assume that a snowplow driver can see you. We've had several close encounters where drivers do not respect the plow or the truck. Make sure you you decrease your following speed, so your following distance. Avoid blind spots. And I don't think a lot of people really understand what that driver can see in that truck. So this was kind of just a little example for you guys. Also, just a little winter driving while on the road. So just make sure you slow down, don't drive erratically. Drive for the condition of the road, not what the sign of the speed or the speed limit sign says. Stay alert, don't drink and drive, and stay off your cell phones, please. I included the link down below for our plow route, so if you have any questions, now's the time.
Can you tell us a little bit, too, about how you coordinate with ODOT and what streets they take care of?
Sure. ODOT handles our highways, so they're going to handle Van Buren, and then they also handle 412, and they handle Willow from 4th Street out to 30th. So they're in charge of all of that. ODOT's really great with us. I work very closely with Bruce, and if they need assistance on some areas, sometimes their trucks can't get out to the areas that we can get out to in a timely manner. So we have no problem jumping in, helping them out, especially last year we had a couple of accidents on 412 due to the ice, and our trucks were able to respond a lot faster than ODOT was. We were happy to do it for the safety of the public.
Okay. Artie?
I also included my contact information along with my foreman's contact information. So if anybody ever needs anything, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to help.
Good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Yep. Item 3.3, update on FEMA reimbursement for October 2020 ice storm cleanup.
Yeah, I know Aaron's going to give us a great update on this, and specifically about the ice storm, the big ice storm we had in October of 2020, which was about 15 months ago. And I remember we talked about that quite a bit and asked for some approvals on some additional money. We were fortunate that we were in a good financial condition, because at the time I mentioned that it takes a long time to get reimbursed. And so I'm interested when you get to the part about how much we've gotten reimbursed yet. Everybody will be interested in that. But could you update us on all that and the process and what we have to go through to try and get the money?
Absolutely. And so as Ashley talked about, when we have these phase 3 storms that they have, that's typically where we have FEMA involved in. So on this ice storm in particular, it was October 26th through the 29th of 2020. And on the 26th of October, Governor Stitt signed a declaration, executive order to declare the emergency. That took until December of 21st of 2020 to be signed by the President of the United States to declare the disaster, which then opened up FEMA funding for the program. During that whole time, from October until the end of March, we were tracking, working with Ashley's crew, with tech services, with utility, all the people who were called in to help with that, as long as with all the contractors that we used. We used a large amount of contracting with this project. And so on April the 9th, we had finally finished gathering all that data and submitted our paperwork April 9th of this year to the Oklahoma Emergency Management Department through the state of Oklahoma. We had 2 follow-on meetings with them at the end of April and one at the beginning of May to give them all the documentation, fill out all their forms, hundreds and hundreds of pages, thousands of pages of backup documentation, all the equipment being used, all the personnel that was on that equipment being used, every invoice to the contractor, all the tickets of how much they picked up every day, lots and lots of paperwork. We had been waiting for the official letter from OEM which typically takes about 4 to 6 months after we submit everything. So we were expecting that to come. So we followed up with them again in December to see where that was, and they had some problems with data corruption in some of their files. So they were having to redo everything that we submitted to them prior, which just happened last week. Based on historical data, from the time that that gets turned into OEM until they give us that approval letter, it takes 4 to 6 months. So once that happens, then it goes before Congress. Anything over $1 million in reimbursement has to go before Congress and be passed, and that takes another 2 to 3 months. And so I expect in probably the next 6 to 9 months to be seeing the funding from that. The total outlay that we spent on that was $1.476 million. And to date, we've received 0 back as reimbursement on that. And over $1 million of that was paid out to contractors and materials and equipment rentals to outside agencies. The other was our equipment and personnel being utilized. So a small portion of that was somewhat already contained within our budget, but we've had over $1 million in outlay that we have not been reimbursed, and I expect probably October, November before we see those dollars back. So update on where we're at. Any questions?
I take it that won't be with interest?
No.
Yeah. So the contracts that we had to pay, where did we fund that from? Or does that come out of a rainy day fund? Or, I mean, how do we pay the bill?
Right, yeah, those come out of our general fund reserves.
Okay.
Yeah. And this money will go back to reimburse it.
There is, and how much does FEMA reimburse? Is it, I don't recall, is it 90-something% or?
Yes, yes.
And then the state has a
that's-
small portion?
On this one in particular, the state does not have a portion on it like our previous ones. Previously, the state or federal did 75, I think the state did 15, and we had to do 15. But this one is structured a little different when this one was declared, and I think this one's coming straight from Fed.
Okay. Someday we'll get a lot of that money back. I don't know if we'll get it all back.
And we'll put it back in our reserves where it came from.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Any questions? Thanks, Aaron. Have no other items on the study session, so we will break and adjourn and come back at 6:30.